Coming up on our newscast tonight, President Moon Jae-in nominates 7 new ministers today, including those who will take the helm at the Unification, ICT, and Tourism Ministries. According to a senior State Department official, the U.S. has discussed the timeline for denuclearization and still believes there's sufficient time to achieve this goal. The official also mentioned sanctions on the regime could get tougher. South Korea's current account surplus inches up on year in January. However, it is the lowest amount since last April when it hit a 6-year low. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome, I'm Daniel Chan. A major cabinet reshuffle took place this morning. President Moon Jae-in nominated 7 new ministers. Hwang Ho-jun starts us off from the nation's top office.
7 new ministers, including the new person in charge of Seoul's affairs with North Korea, were nominated on Friday morning. The Blue House called them qualified people who will bring substantial results.
As President Moon is now entering the second half of his term, the latest cabinet reshuffle shows how much he stresses the importance of tangible accomplishments for the public, and to that end, the necessity of hiring qualified personnel with a proven track record.
President Moon nominated Kim Hyun-chul, who has served as the head of the Korea Institute for National Unification, to replace the outgoing unification minister Cho Myung-gyun. The Blue House said Kim is known for his vast experience in inter-Korean economic cooperation and North Korean nuclear issues. Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology professor Cho Dong-ho was nominated as the new Minister of Science, ICT, and Future Planning for his expertise in the field. For the Culture, Sports, and Tourism Minister, the president chose Park Yang-woo, who served as Vice Minister for that ministry during the Nomuhyun administration. The new Land, Infrastructure, and Transport Minister will be Choi Jong-ho, who served as the Vice Minister during the Park Geun-hye administration. And for the Ministry for Oceans and Fisheries, Moon Sung-hyuk, a professor at World Maritime University, was selected. He also has experience as a first mate at Hyundai Merchant Marine. 2 4-term lawmakers were also nominated to be a part of President Moon's new cabinet. Park Young-sun, of the ruling Democratic Party of Korea, was nominated as the new Minister of SMEs and Startups. And Jin Young, also from the ruling party, was chosen as the new Minister of Interior and Safety. With Thursday's reshuffle, 4 of the lawmakers turned ministers are expected to return to the party to run in the general elections next year. The Blue House said the nominees all passed the government's so-called 7 irregularities test, which bars those who have been involved in either military service evasion, real estate speculation, tax fraud, false residence registration, academic plagiarism, drunk driving, or sexual misconduct. The nominees will go through a parliamentary confirmation hearing before taking up their positions. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
Kim Hyun-chul, the Unification Minister nominee, vows to work on resuming inter-Korean economic projects, including the reopening of a joint industrial complex and tourism to the north. The comments came Friday after the U.S. State Department said it's not considering sanctions waivers to allow these projects to go ahead. Kim said Seoul needs to get creative after the breakdown of the Hanoi Summit and bringing Pyongyang and Washington back to the negotiating table. The minister nominee is determined to do his best to realize President Moon's new Korean Peninsula vision aimed at ending confrontation and bringing about peace and cooperation. South Korea's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hun says the U.S. is ready to engage in dialogue with Pyongyang. He arrived in Seoul after discussing the outcome of the second North Korea-U.S. Summit with his counterpart Stephen Biegun in Washington. Upon arrival, he told reporters that his meeting went well and they had good talks. The new envoy also mentioned America firmly believes the Hanoi Summit was productive and constructive. We continue to hear various behind-the-scenes stories from the Hanoi Summit. The latest comes from a senior member of the State Department that Washington still hopes to denuclearize the regime over the coming years. Lee Ji-won shares with us the official's remarks.
The U.S. believes the final, fully verified denuclearization of North Korea is still achievable before the end of President Trump's first term in office, which is January 2021. A senior State Department official told reporters Thursday that the U.S. has discussed the timeline, and at this point, Washington believes there's sufficient time to achieve this. The official added denuclearization includes taking out all the key parts of the North's nuclear fuel cycle, all of the fissile material, nuclear warheads, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and permanently freezing any other weapons of mass destruction, including chemical and biological. The official also discussed sanctions on the North, saying they will remain in place, but they could get tougher should President Trump choose to strengthen them. On the inter-Korean projects, the official said the U.S. is not considering giving exemptions. This is likely on the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Complex and the resumption of South Korean tours to the North's Kumgangsan Mountain, which the South has been pushing to resume while abiding by international sanctions. On recent reports about activity at the North's Dongchangri missile facility, the official said the Trump administration is still trying to determine exactly what North Korea is doing, but did not necessarily agree with those who say the activity is a sign of North Korea's discontent following the Hanoi summit. Though careful not to downplay the concerns, the official also said the Seoul facility is not a critical part of North Korea's nuclear infrastructure, but it does need to be dismantled during the denuclearization process. As the tug-of-war between North Korea and the U.S. is likely to continue for a while, the official said it's now up to the North, to some extent, to decide to engage on the expectations of its denuclearization. 이지원, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. signed a one-year deal that raises Seoul's share of defense spending on Friday. Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa and U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Harry Harris inked a deal this afternoon, raising the country's share of the defense burden by 8.2%. The signing comes as South Korea agreed to pay some $920 million to support American troops stationed in Korea. The government has completed the administrative procedures with cabinet approval earlier this week and is expecting the deal to be ratified by the parliament by the end of this month so that it can take effect in April. President Moon Jae-in is embarking on a trip to 3 ASEAN countries next week. His focus will be on strengthening Korea's cooperation with these nations as part of his new Southern policy. Take a look.
The president's first overseas trip of the year begins with Southeast Asian nations. Over a one-week period starting from Sunday, March 10th, the president will be traveling to Brunei, Malaysia, and Cambodia with hopes of boosting ties with ASEAN member states in line with the South Korean leader's new Southern policy.
The president's overseas trip next week will be an opportunity to accelerate the new Southern policy and diversify Korea's trade market and network of global production that's been concentrated in the U.S. and China.
From the 10th of March until the 12th, the president will be in Brunei for a sit-down with Sultan Hassan al Bolkiah and a state dinner. The president is expected to broaden existing cooperation on energy and infrastructure while working to develop Brunei's patent system. And the president could also lay the groundwork for a successful hosting of the South Korea-ASEAN Summit scheduled for the end of this year. The president's next stop is Malaysia, the first visit to the country by a South Korean leader in 9 years. He will be attending an official welcoming ceremony and a state banquet upon his arrival. It is expected that the leader will work on upgrading their current relations to a more future-oriented partnership and cooperate on future technologies such as artificial intelligence and smart cities. And the president will wrap up his 3-nation tour in Cambodia, where he will be greeted by King Norodom Sihamoni, the prime minister, and Korean nationals living in the country. During his stay there, the president will work on expanding bilateral ties in infrastructure, finance, and agriculture.
The president's pivot to ASEAN is looking to get a boost through the week-long trip to the region. It is hoped that the trip will be an opportunity to lay the foundation for constructive bilateral and multilateral meetings lined up this year, including the South Korea-ASEAN Summit and the first ever Korea-Mekong Summit. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
South Korea posted a current account surplus for the 81st month in a row in January. However, its size shrank down to the smallest in 9 months. Kim Hye-sung help us look beyond the numbers.
Korea posted a current account surplus of $2.8 billion in January. That's about $2 billion lower than December and also the smallest monthly surplus since April last year when it hit a 6-year low of $1.7 billion. The Bank of Korea attributed the fall to smaller goods account surplus, which narrowed to an 11-month low of $5.6 billion, with exports falling over 5% on year to $49 billion, posting 2 consecutive months of contraction. Semiconductor exports, which accounted for a fifth of Korea's total exports in 2018, dropped over 22% on year in January on decreasing global demand.
Both the price and quantity of chips are dropping on lower demand. This trend is likely to continue at least until the latter half of this year. Another key export, petrochemical goods, which accounted for 10% of Korea's total exports last year, is also falling on lower oil prices. So the total exports are likely to continue to fall in the next couple of months.
By region, exports to China dropped near 20% and exports to the Middle East dropped by 27% on slowing demand. Imports decreased slightly by 2%. The services account deficit, however, narrowed to $3.6 billion from $4.4 billion a year earlier. The central bank said both the transport account deficit and travel account deficit had decreased. In the travel account, the number of Chinese and Japanese visitors to Korea soared into double digits, helping bring the travel account deficit below the $2 billion mark. Kim Hye-sung, Arirang News.
Hyundai Heavy Industries, one of the largest shipyards in the world, has formally inked an agreement to acquire local rival Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering. The deal may be sealed, but the acquisition process is unlikely to be smooth sailing. Oh Soo-young explains why.
Hyundai Heavy Industries has sealed a deal to acquire local rival Daewoo Shipbuilding and Marine Engineering, growing its stake in the global market to some 21%. Hyundai held a signing ceremony on Friday with Daewoo's largest shareholder, Korea Development Bank. Under the deal, Hyundai Heavy Industries is set to create a holding company to manage shipbuilding units, including Daewoo Shipbuilding. KDB will transfer its current shares in Daewoo to the new company, becoming its second largest shareholder with an 18% stake, following Hyundai Heavy Industries' 26% stake. The takeover comes as shipbuilding companies are still reeling from a global downturn in the industry, leading to financial troubles and wide-scale layoffs. Daewoo has been struggling financially for over 2 decades, with its parent Daewoo Group having gone bankrupt after the 1997 financial crisis. The ailing company has received around $8.8 billion of bailout loans and public funds since 2015. The acquisition aims to stabilise the country's shipbuilding sector by easing competition and excess capacity, while helping grow competitiveness amid increased competition from other Asian countries. It would also create 2 dominant shipbuilders in Korea, Hyundai Heavy Industries and Samsung Heavy Industries. However, some challenges still remain, due to the sheer size of the market share that the envisioned entity would hold. Fair trade authorities in Korea, as well as trading partner countries, would have to determine whether the acquisition meets antitrust regulations. Also, unionised workers of both companies have fiercely opposed the takeover, expressing fears of massive layoffs. Hyundai Heavy Industries and Korea Development Bank released a joint statement on Friday, saying that they plan to retain Daewoo's independent management structure while assuring workers that their jobs are secure. They added subcontractors and affiliated firms will also be retained. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
An aerial observation to trace the origins of fine dust concentration over the Korean peninsula will be carried out. The National Institute of Environmental Research plans to use an airplane carrying fine dust analysis equipment to observe the particles over the waters between the country and China. The mission to scientifically trace the origins of fine dust concentration will begin Saturday and will involve a total of 20 flights over a 1-month period. The institute plans to utilize the results in future negotiations with Beijing over responsibility for the inflow of pollutants. One of the ways that could help to bring down the high levels of fine dust is cloud seeding. Several tests have been conducted in the past, with more planned. Cha Sang-mi help us gauge the effectiveness of this measure.
In a bid to tackle rising levels of fine dust in the country, the South Korean government has turned to creating artificial rain. Known as cloud seeding, the method involves aircraft loaded with canisters full of chemical substances, such as silver iodide, which are dispersed into the air. Upward winds carry the substance into the clouds, which combine with cool moisture to form ice crystals and water droplets, resulting in precipitation.
We conducted our first cloud seeding test in 1963. 42 tests were carried out between 2008 and 2017, and we also bought a weather surveillance aircraft last year to monitor the effects.
However, there are several limitations to cloud seeding, with the method only possible under a precise set of atmospheric conditions. South Korea's weather agency and the environment ministry say that the fine dust is reduced when there's over 10 millimeters of rain per hour. But so far, Korea Meteorological Administration has seen less than 1 millimeter of rain, far short of the target. Experts have emphasized the importance of close coordination with other countries, which have tinkered with cloud seeding in the past.
Some countries like China already did some experiment on this, and the other countries did the same thing. But the first thing that we have to do as a global society, we need to share those results country by country so that we can have some milestone or what to do list to move forward.
Neil Bracken, the head of US-based WMI, a firm specialized in weather modification services, says cloud seeding is a proven technology that's been tried and tested in the field.
Well, what we can say is we know in the field cloud seeding can increase precipitation. We know in the field and through scientific research, increased precipitation will reduce pollutants such as microdust. Now, is it going to eliminate the microdust? No. But can this have a meaningful impact in reducing the amount of microdust that's hitting the Korean Peninsula? Absolutely.
The government also calmed public worries concerning toxic rainfall mixed with fine dust, saying low-pressure clouds will cycle out polluted air before the fall of precipitation. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Fine dust levels in the nation finally went down low enough for people to be out and about without masks, at least for now. But a week-long stretch of poor air quality changed how people spend their leisure time. According to our Korea-U.S, staying indoors, taking refuge in places where they can get extra fresh air is the preferred option.
Many people are now staying indoors when the air quality is bad in Korea, and the latest data shows that many of them are hitting on multiplexes and cinemas. BC Card, a Korean credit card company, says revenues at these businesses soared around 30% on days with poor and very poor levels of fine dust compared to normal days, according to data compiled between 2017 and 2019. Some cinemas have even installed new features that provide visitors with extra fresh air. This movie theater in Seoul makes you feel like you're in the forest, with an oxygen generator system and machines spraying fresh scents. Visitors are willing to pay more for this unique experience.
There have been high levels of fine dust recently, and I came to this particular movie theater because I can breathe fresh air while watching a movie.
Another place that garnered attention is a cafe in Seoul, surrounded by 20 or so air purifiers. Wherever you sit, you're right next to an air purifier, which displays the levels of fine dust in and outside the cafe. This cafe saw their revenues increase around 30% over the past week, compared to their usual sales.
People who want fresh air provided by something other than an air purifier can take a trip to a botanical garden. Inside this greenhouse, people can breathe all easier while enjoying plants from around the world.
This garden features around 3,000 types of plants, and many are air cleaning plants.
I feel like the air quality has finally improved today. I came here because I think the air in botanical gardens is cleaner than in other indoor areas.
Many people are staying away from outdoor activities these days because they enjoy the freshness here. Around 15,000 people visit every day on average.
The fine dust problem in Korea is changing the way people spend their time and money, and it appears that environmentally friendly experiences will continue to grow in popularity. Korea-U.S, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories now. In commemoration of International Women's Day, various events are taking place around the country to promote gender equality and women's rights. Under the slogan, "Me Too, We Change the World," the Korean Women's Association United is holding a ceremony Friday in Seoul's Gwanghwamun Square. former prosecutor Seo Ji-hyun, who broke her silence on sexual abuse, and Kim Bok-dong, a victim of Japan's sexual slavery who passed away in January, will both be honored at the event. Elsewhere, hundreds of employees at women's rights groups staged a walkout at 3 p.m. today in protest of the wage gap and gender discrimination at work. Staying with International Women's Day, a global day to promote gender equality and women's rights, here in Korea, gender wage gap and corporate glass ceilings are still some of the biggest issues. Seo Bo-bin reports.
International Women's Day is celebrated every year on March 8th. South Korea has also been commemorating the date since 1985 in order to promote gender equality and women's rights. In honor of International Women's Day, here is a look at where women stand in Korean society.
I can only tell you how poor female workers' rights are in South Korea and how bad the reality is for many female workers. The percentage of low-wage female workers is 35.2%, the highest in the OECD. This statistic alone highlights the dire working conditions facing female workers in South Korea.
According to data, women in South Korea are forced to endure the worst working conditions out of 33 OECD countries. As for the gender wage gap, South Korea has the largest gap in the OECD, with women earning a staggering 36% less than men on average. The corporate glass ceiling is also proving almost unbreakable for women in South Korea. Latest data shows only 1 out of every 100 executives at South Korea's top 30 conglomerates are women. Only 21 women head up business groups in South Korea, representing a mere 1.3% of the total.
Yes, there's still gender discrimination in employment. In such a work climate, men are all about qualifications, and women who can't match them get demoted or even ousted from the company.
The Moon Jae-in administration pledged last year to make South Korean society more equal and fair. The aim was for women to hold 10% of high-ranking government positions and a fifth of executive positions at public companies, but this goal remains elusive.
The government isn't doing much. They're supposed to be supervising labor conditions better, and that's why women's rights are not being handled properly. The government should make women's issue a priority and provide proper measures.
Gender equality and women's rights is key to South Korea's social development. The country still has a long way to go to become an equal society, but through participation and cooperation, there's hope the situation will begin to gradually improve. Seo Bo-bin, Arirang News.
Time to turn to our Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, I hear clean air and spring showers are in the forecast for this weekend.
That's right, Daniel. And after a week of choking conditions, air quality this weekend will remain superb. So go ahead and enjoy that stroll in the nearby park. However, clouds will start gathering across Northeast Asia as we approach Saturday afternoon, eventually drenching Jeju Island. And by Sunday, the entire country will be wet. And spring showers will be heavy on Jeju and the southeast coastal areas, possibly amounting up to 80 millimeters of precipitation. And the northern provinces, such as the capital area, will be less affected by the storm, with less than 5 millimeters of precipitation expected. In the morning, Seoul will wake up to 1 degree Celsius. Chuncheon and Daejeon will both drop below freezing point. And with a 10-degree boost into the day, Seoul will top out to 13 degrees. Daewoo will reach up to 17, while Gyeongju hits 19 degrees. After the weekend rain, the first half of next week will be under clear skies before more showers are let down on Thursday. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
This is where we have to wrap things up. Wherever you may be tuning in from, thanks for staying with us.